Greetings, everyone. Long time no see. It is I, the informant, back to bring you some of the latest news updates from the United States and abroad. And yes, I know I have been gone for quite some time. And I know I said a while ago that I was going to be more consistent with uploads. And, you make goals, you make standards for yourselves. And then, the life, as it always does, tends to throw a wrench into your plans, and then you have to adapt. And in these cases, I've had to pretty much deal with things in life and work and put this on the back burner, unfortunately. And it's really unfortunate because a lot has been happening over the past few weeks since I last updated. So if anybody is still following, watching, all that good stuff, I really do appreciate it. Please continue to like, subscribe, comment, and I'm also taking a different approach as opposed to the long-winded videos that go almost an hour or more. I'm going to try more bite-sized videos that are more of one topic specific, and see how everybody likes those instead. Simply because there may be some things in the longer-winded videos that I talk about that maybe some people aren't interested in, so they just skip or don't watch. So I figure, why not try and break these up a little bit, like a lot of other content creators do, and we'll see how that goes. And if people prefer the long-winded videos, please let me know. If the individual videos are better, please let me know as well. And without going into more detail and everything, I've just been dealing with a lot as far as work, personal life, and also health. I actually have a doctor's appointment today because I haven't been feeling that well. I don't think it's definitely not COVID related or anything like that. But so all that aside, thanks for watching, and we'll get right into it. So this is probably one of the more interesting topics. And that is the Solomon Islands and China. So this was published by NBC News April 19th. So the U.S. is sending two top officials to the Solomon Islands following a visit last week by an Australian senator over concerns that China could establish a military presence in the South Pacific island nation. So basically, I believe that pact was already signed between China and the Solomon Islands, and of course countries like Australia and the United States are raising a big fuss about it because of the potential for China having a military presence, maybe having a small naval base there on the island nation. And well, of course, we just can't have that. It says here in Beijing, the foreign minister Wang Yi and his Solomon Islands counterpart Jeremiah Menele officially signed a security agreement, quote, the other day. So no specific date was given, but they did say that a security agreement was signed. And a draft of the pact, which was leaked, said Chinese warships could stop in the Solomon Islands and China could send police and armed forces there to, quote, assist in maintaining social order. Now, I did see an article that was posted about a week ago that was saying that the Solomon Islands could or would restrict Chinese police. So still kind of murky as far as the details on that is. But Wang Yi did say, we are committed to helping the Solomon Islands to strengthen its capacity building to maintain national security. He said the agreement does not seek to supersede the South Pacific nation's security ties with other nations. Now, of course, they're going to say that because they're trying to say whatever they can to just try and keep everything as, I guess, diplomatic as possible. Or, they're just pulling a Russia and, getting the facts right and distorting them at their leisure after the fact. So, and for those of you who don't know where the Solomon Islands are, they are obviously here in the South Pacific, to the northwest of Fiji. And if we zoom out, there is Papua New Guinea, and they're right, obviously, danger close to Australia. So, and then from there, they are not far at all from Hawaii. And obviously that could cause some major issues to the United States' security. Because as you can see, coming from the ports in China is a long way, so they would obviously, if they ever so chose to have some type of military action, boom, refuel, boom, and then, well, then I will leave that to everyone's imagination. And then, of course, immediate striking distance from the Solomon Islands to Queensland, Australia. So obviously that's causing a lot of drama. Here from Yahoo News, posted on April 22nd. The Biden administration on Thursday warned the Solomon Islands that the United States will take unspecified action against the South Pacific nation should its recently concluded cooperation agreement with China pose a threat to U.S. or allied interests. Now, of course, that's all at their definition of threat to the United States or allied interests. And whatever that is, we can't say. So the White House said the message was delivered directly to the country's leadership by a visiting senior U.S. delegation. I believe that was the one mentioned in the previous article. The delegation expressed concern that the deal with China raises questions about its scope and purpose, according to the White House, which also lamented transparency in the agreement and cast doubt on Solomon Islands officials' claims that the deal was purely domestic. Now, again, this is all political speak. Of course, they're saying it's just a purely domestic deal, blah, 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 trying to create as much fog over the situation as possible. Now, me personally, I believe that the Solomon Islands are making a business decision here. And I feel like a lot of other countries are going to start making these decisions in the future. What I mean by that is, I think they and other countries are realizing that as of right now, Europe and the United States are in the weakest positions they've ever been within modern history. The United States is facing unprecedented economic and supply chain issues. The European Union is having probably one of the biggest energy crises it's ever faced in its entirety. And you also have, obviously, the war in Ukraine. And I believe a lot of these countries are looking at both sides, and they're seeing China becoming a rising, ever expanding manufacturing empire. And, Russia, of course, being able to withstand the barrage of sanctions delivered to by the European Union and the United States, and by continuing to push out their commodities to what they call friendly countries and making trade agreements with them, such as India and China, for example. So I believe a lot of these smaller countries, like the Solomon Islands, for example, are looking at this and they're saying, we're going to go with these guys because they seem to have a better control of things than everybody else does. And the United States has already shown weaknesses when it comes to foreign policy. I mean, you look at Afghanistan, and now you look at Ukraine, and everyone is just kind of weary about what they can expect from the West. So I believe, these countries like the Solomon Islands are making a business decision and thinking that the other side is a safer bet to make some sort of alliance with. If I can relate to it somehow in some fantastical way, because I like to make these types of connections between the real world and fictional world. I think of it as like Saruman joining Sauron because he believes that him and his army can't be stopped and there's no sense in trying to fight them, and he tries to convince Gandalf to do the same in his tower before they actually have a duel. So I believe that's what's happening here. I believe a lot of these smaller countries are just all like, you say, like the West is saying they have our back and all that stuff, but I don't know how much we can trust them. However, this side, China, they're offering us this, and they seem to have everything stable on their side. Again, that's all up to speculation. We know the Chinese economy is fringe at best, and we also know that they're the most authoritarian country in the world. I mean, just look at Shanghai and the lockdowns that they have there. Now, this is from Australia. This is from just yesterday. Australia will work with its allies to ensure China does not set up a military base in the Solomon Islands. Prime Minister Scott Morrison has pledged during a heated pre-election debate. So obviously, I believe Australia is having elections, which is, May 21st. It's later this month. And they are saying that they're going to do everything they can to stop China from setting up a military base. Then you come here to The Guardian. This was on Monday, the 25th. U.S. won't rule out military action if China establishes base in Solomon Islands. Ambassador Daniel Crittenbrink warns security pact presents potential regional security implications. What does this all sound like? This sounds vaguely familiar when it comes to international diplomacy. This sounds a lot like what Vladimir Putin was saying before the war in Ukraine. He was saying, I don't want Ukraine joining NATO. I don't want bases in NATO or in Ukraine. I don't want NATO troops in Ukraine. I want a security guarantee that that Ukraine's going to remain neutral. I want it demilitarized. I want the fighting in Donbass to stop, after Ukraine pretty much threw out the Minsk agreement. And of course the West was saying this is unacceptable and that cannot happen. But it looks like we're doing the same exact thing to China over the Solomon Islands. And apparently the Solomon Islands is such a threat to the United States that they're willing to use military action if China dares to build a base there. I think you can see where I'm going. These two issues are exactly the same. Russia did not want Ukraine to be militarized. Russia did not want Ukraine to join NATO. Russia did not want NATO troops, NATO bases, potential missile silos in Ukraine. And all signs were pointing to that being a potential outcome. Now, we can say that ever since the Soviet Union collapsed and they had Russia had their agreement with NATO and the U.S., not one step east towards Russia. Well, what's that? Well, that shit went out the door decades ago, and ever since then, more and more countries have been joining NATO. More and more NATO countries have been building up forces along the Russian border, and it's just been a honeypot, ever since. So now that China is making this security pact with the Solomon Islands, and there's a possibility for them to build a base. Oh, what's this? The United States all of a sudden has a huge problem with this. Oh, you can't do that. That violates our security. Just like Vladimir Putin was saying about Ukraine. Possibility of Ukraine joining NATO is a violation of Russia's security and their sovereignty. And not to mention the everlasting, conflict in the Donbass region of Ukraine. So you can see the hypocrisy is absolutely astounding. And I can't be the only one that sees this. I mean, other countries around the world have to see this hypocrisy as well. And they'd be just to point it out because it's ridiculous. Who are we to point at Russia and say that they're wrong for their interpretation on what violates their own sovereignty and security, when we ourselves are saying that whatever the Solomon Islands and China agree on is a threat to our sovereignty, and we're going to use military action. We're going to consider. We won't rule out military action if China establishes a base in the Solomon Islands. You see what I'm saying? Like, I would not care. I honestly would not care about the U.S. making these accusations if they weren't going against these very same statements that Russia was making about Ukraine. If the U.S. had just stayed out of it and just said, hey, war is bad, let's make peace, and just left it at that, I'd be okay with what the U.S. is saying here about the Solomon Islands, because there's no hypocrisy. But the fact that they are saying it's wrong for Russia to do exactly what we're doing with the Solomon Islands is just so backwards. It's hard to even imagine it being a reality. So that's pretty much the story on this. I'm going to leave it at that. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. I know I'm posting now to 3 platforms: BitChute, Rumble, and YouTube. So I really do appreciate you for tuning in, and I will see you in the next video, which should be uploaded shortly.